Hi, boys and girls. Today we're going to continue with Who is Stealing the 12 Days of Christmas by Martha Freeman. Chapter 4. No one is named plain Bub, but that is the only name I have ever heard for him. He is an old guy. In his driveway is an extra car that never goes anywhere. He doesn't always mow his lawn or shovel his walk. He doesn't put up Christmas lights or play music. Some of the neighbors call Bub's house an eyesore. An eyesore would mean something that doesn't look very good. According to Billy Jensens, Bub used to be a bank robber, and before that he was a professional wrestler. Billy never said anything about catnapping, though. And anyway, everybody knows Billy tells stories. As I stood on the walk in front of Bub's, trying to decide what to do, I figured out only 3 things were for sure. 1, Bub is big with a loud, gruff voice. 2, my cat was missing. 3, there was an orange tail swishing in the window. It all added up to one thing. Alex Parakeet to the rescue. Too bad Alex Parakeet is a wimp. Unlike my cat, I am not big-shouldered or muscly. I am more like small with a round middle. My parents say I'm a healthy kid, and this is what healthy kids are supposed to look like. Muscles come later. But what else would parents say? That I look like a party balloon, and someday if I'm lucky, I'll look like a beach ball? If you know anything about parents, you know that this is not how they operate. I could ask Dad for help, I thought, but I knew what Dad would say, that Bub is a neighbor, that Bub has a gruff voice only because he used to smoke cigarettes, that I'm certainly capable of ringing a doorbell and asking about my own cat's tail, aren't I? I had no choice. I walked up the driveway and up the steps to the porch. I tried to look cool, like someone who has been walking on his own for years and years now. Then I breathed 2 times. I pressed the doorbell. Almost instantly, the door creaked, I swear, and swung open. What do you want? Bub's voice was loud and gruff as ever. He was wearing blue jeans and a plaid shirt. My nose came up to his belly, which stuck out over his silver belt buckle. My cat, I said. Bub stepped aside. Come on in. Soup's been simmering all day. Finally tastes right. That's okay. I didn't move. I mean, thanks though. Do you have my cat? Bub scratched his cheek. Let me think, he said. Big fellow, orange, yellow eyes. I nodded. Seems to me I saw a cat like that somewhere, but a morale interrupted him. Then Luau walked into the front hall, looked at me, and side-rubbed Bub's legs. Haven't seen him lately, Bub said. But that's him, I pointed. Oh, that cat? I'd about decided that cat was mine. Today was his turn for the remote. He prefers old movies. I like Jeopardy. You mean he comes over here a lot, I asked. Last couple of days he does. I suspect he's after what I got in the bathtub. Thinks it's cat food, which I guess it would be if he got a hold of it. Don't worry, though. Door's shut. What was there to worry about? What was in the bathtub? I was working up my courage to ask when Luau meowed again. Then he climbed his front claws up my leg and butted my knee with his nose. His tail was swishing. He's trying to tell you something, Bub said. Yeah, I said, but what? Bub opened the door wider and looked across the driveway to the Ryans' yard next door. Well, how do you like that, Bub said. Leave it to a cat to notice. I turned around, and when I saw, my heart bumped. What was going on anyway? You might not necessarily remember that the Ryans are partridge in a pear tree, or more precisely, disguised rubber ducky in a dogwood. But now the Ryans weren't either one. The ducky was as gone as the Lee's goose. The Ryans were just plain tree. Uh-oh, it's getting interesting. Who would steal decorations? Chapter 5. When I picked up Luau, Bub laughed. I'm not sure which of you is bigger, he said. Thanks a lot, I thought. But what I said was, thanks for keeping him. No trouble, said Bub. But remind him how tomorrow I get the remote. I carried Luau over my shoulder, and all the way home he tickled my ear with his whiskers. I thought about Bub. He still scared me. But Luau really seemed to like him. Then there was the missing bird, the second missing bird. What was up with that anyway? Why would somebody steal fake birds? At our front step, I had to drop Luau to open the door. I was half afraid he'd run, but he waited politely and then walked inside with his tail flying, His Majesty returning home from a visit from a neighboring kingdom. Back already? Dad called. I brought Luau. In the kitchen, I explained how he'd been at Bub's house, which made Dad laugh. Oh, and another bird's missing. The ducky, partridge, I mean. Dad looked up. You're kidding, he said. That's not good. The lights go on at 6, and it's after 4 now. I wonder if Beth's home from school yet. Beth is Mrs. Ryan. She's a first-grade teacher. By now, it was too late to go to Aries. When I called, he said it didn't matter because Matt Kaiser was there, and Matt Kaiser has 32 mice. Aries did not need to mention all about Matt's mice. Everyone in town knows all about Matt's mice. For a second, I felt grumpy that I only have 6, but then Aries said, "See you at Russell's birthday party," and I felt better. Chapter 6. It's the same every year at the Jensens holiday party. All the neighbors who put up 12-day decorations go, which means everyone on Chickadee Court except Bub. At 6 o'clock, Professor Jensen flips the switch that turns on the lights and music at all the houses. After that, the kids go down to the rec room, which has a ping pong table, a widescreen TV, and a huge Christmas tree that is only for Michael and Billy. We eat junk and watch movies and slam ping pong balls. Finally, our parents get done with their talk, and tell us they're really sorry they kept us out so late and we should have been in bed hours ago. This year, besides the neighbors, Michael and Billy's grandparents would be there. They were visiting for the holidays, Dad told me. They live over the mountain in Bellberg. Mom still wasn't home from work, so Dad and I went by ourselves. We were hardly in the door when Yasmin came over to us all excited. "There's trouble with the 12-day decorations," she said. "Somebody stole them." "I know all about it," I said. "But it was only a couple of birds. Luau's the one that discovered it." Yasmin was disappointed that I knew more than she did, so she changed the subject. "Are you hungry?" "I'm ravenous." That means really hungry. "Let's see if any of the food up here is edible." We went into the dining room and looked at the table over. Smelly cheeses, crackers with burnt specks, mini pie things, mini rice ball things, cookies with lumps, bread with mysterious orange dots, mini sandwiches full of gushy stuff. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Yasmin asked. I nodded. "The gushy stuff looks just like toothpaste." "Toothpaste would probably taste better." "How can grown-ups eat this?" I asked. Yasmin shook her head. "Not even a potato chip." Beside us, Michael was in the dining room along with 2 people I figured were his grandparents. Grandpa was bald. He wore a red sweater. Grandma had bright red hair and wore glasses. Her sweater had green happy faces on it. They were each holding plates piled with shrimp. Grandma sure seemed to like shrimp, which to me looked precisely like naked bugs. Between bites, she did the usual grandma thing, squeezed Michael and cooed at him. Michael rolled his eyes the way any kid would, but I could tell he was trying to be patient. "Such a lucky boy," she said. "I can't believe all the advantages you have. Big house, fancy food." She waved the plate. "We couldn't give your dad all this, you know. Not on what we had in those days. The lock shop never made us a dime." "I know, Gran," Michael said. "Leave the boy alone, Jerry." Michael's grandpa nodded at us. "His friends are here." Grandma ignored him. "The only thing I wish is that your parents would lighten up on this gun business. Your dad grew up hunting. It's since he met your mom that he's gone all peaceful. There didn't used to be anything—" "Gary," Dad interrupted. Grandma sighed. "Can't an old woman express an opinion?" "You're not old, Gran," Michael said. "Bless you, honey." She gave him another squeeze and then looked over at Yasmin and me. "Now who are these youngsters, Michael? Friends of yours?" Michael introduced us, and she asked about school the way grown-ups always do. After that, it seemed like either Yasmin or I should ask her something, and I couldn't think of anything except maybe how she made her hair that color. But Yasmin gets more practice talking to grown-ups. Her parents make her go to the Baptist church every Sunday, and she has to stay for donuts after the service, too. I went with her once, and all you do is talk to grown-ups. It's scary. "Was that you I saw jogging, Mrs. Jensen?" Yasmin asked, just like she was a grown-up herself. Michael's grandma grinned. "That was me, all right," she said. "I've never had any luck with money, but I sure as heck keep my body trim. Sometimes it's hard to find the time with this new business of ours, but I do try." By now, the time was after 6, and it looked as if the kids would be stuck upstairs with the grown-ups for a while. It was a risky situation. Lots of wild, hungry kids mixed with lots of boring grown-ups in a fancy house full of breakable decorations. But there was something lucky. Sophie Sikora had pulled one of her world-famous temper tantrums, so her parents had kept her home. If Sophie had been there all this time, the Jensens' house would look like a bulldozer had come to visit. She's just that kind of kid. Yasmin and I went out into the living room and snagged seats on the sofa next to her little brother, Jeremiah. For a while, we sat and watched people talking. "Hasn't anybody got anything we could use for a partridge?" Mrs. Ryan asked. "Bill tried, but every rubber ducky in town has sold out." "I've got a rooster ornament on my tree," Mrs. Dascanato said. "Would that do?" "How big is it?" Mrs. Ryan asked. Mr. Stone interrupted. "Entirely inappropriate," he said. "A rooster looks nothing like a partridge." "Neither does a ducky," Miss McNick said, "and no one has ever complained." Mr. Stone said he'd been meaning to bring up the matter of the ducky. Mrs. Ryan said she didn't realize that Mr. Stone was a bird authority. Mrs. Lee wanted to know if it would be all right if the rooster stood in for her missing goose. Mr. Stone said it certainly would not be all right, and what was this world coming to when people couldn't identify basic birds? My eyes followed the cup of eggnog in Mr. Stone's hand. The madder he got, the more it sloshed. "Do you think he'll let somebody have it?" I whispered. Yasmin nodded. "I bet Mrs. Lee. She's really exasperating, my mom says." I shook my head. "I say it's Mrs. Ryan. Look how her ears are turning pink. She's going to lose it. He's going to blast her." "What if he spills on us?" Jeremiah said. "The last straw was the passenger pigeon," Mr. Stone said. A few drops of eggnog splashed. Yasmin and I grinned. This was it. Eggnog cream rinse. But then my dad had to come over and spoil it. "Now remind me, Ted," Dad said to Mr. Stone. "Where was it you bought those calling birds?" And of course, Mr. Stone explained how he made the calling birds. Everyone in the neighborhood knew this like they knew their own house numbers. He told the story every year. "I can't believe your dad," said Yasmin. "What a party pooper," I said. "It's too bad your mom couldn't come," said Yasmin. "Why, she's an even worse party pooper." "That's not what I meant," said Yasmin. "Where is she anyway?" "Working. Something big, but I don't know what yet." "Bigger than missing plastic birds?" Yasmin asked. I shrugged. "In College Springs?" Small fingers gripped my knee. I looked down. It was Toby Lee. He was learning to walk. I could see from his frown that it was hard work. First he aimed his body, then he tilted forward, then he moved his legs as fast as they would go. If the legs didn't keep up with the rest of him, he pitched over on the floor. Then Mrs. Lee would pick him up, or some other neighbor. I had seen Mr. Lee only twice in my life. Mom says he works all the time. Then she always frowns and adds, "That poor woman." I gave Toby Lee my hand. "Steady, bud," I said. He grinned at me. There was drool dripping off his chin. I turned him and aimed him at Billy Jensen. "Go," I said. He tilted, he ran, he was off. Billy is 5. He got a Discman for his birthday. Now the phones are permanently attached to his ears. He lives in Discman land, just him and whatever loud, bad music a 5-year-old listens to. So of course he didn't notice Toby till Toby tilted into him with a bump that knocked Billy off balance. For a second, I thought Billy might stay on his feet, but he didn't. This was a shame, because Billy happened to be standing next to the Christmas tree, the big, fancy, white, for company Christmas tree, the one with all the fragile ornaments the Jensens don't put on the for kids tree downstairs. When Toby hit him, Billy toppled over into the tree, which, timber, toppled over. Needles, balls, and lights shot everywhere. So did the guests. So did the drinks. "My antique ornaments," Miss Jensen wailed. "Bring napkins. We need a broom here. Watch out for that glass." The grown-ups tripped over each other trying to clean up. Toby Lee was fine. He had fallen onto his diaper-cushioned tailbone, and now he sat in the middle of everything, laughing and clapping his hands. I bet it was a thrill to be so small and cause so much trouble. But Jeremiah said, "Someone's going to step on him and squash him like a bug." I thought Jeremiah might be right. So I pushed through all the grown-ups, scooped Toby up, and set him safe on the sofa next to us. In a few minutes, the tree was back in place and plugged in. Mrs. Jensen, who has long pink fingernails and always looked perfect, drank 2 quick cups of eggnog. Everybody clapped, Toby Lee loudest of all. Then the doorbell rang. When Professor Jensen answered, Luau strolled in. "Would you look at that?" said Yasmin. You'd think that feline had received an invitation in the mail. What's feline mean? Means cat. Kee! Squealed Toby Lee. Meow! Kee! Meow! Luau put his nose in the air and sniffed. Then he headed for the dining room. Alex, Dad had just spotted Luau. I don't know, Dad. He came in when the front door opened. What did he want in the dining room, though? Toothpaste sandwiches? Oh, of course. Shrimp. I followed Luau, but he was sneaky. By the time I got there, he had disappeared. Meanwhile, I could hear Professor Jensen talking to someone at the door. The voice outside said, You got 50 people out there, John. They want the 12 days of Christmas, and they want it now. I forgot about Luau for a second and pushed the drapes so that I could see out the windows. The first thing I noticed was the white delivery van with a cat's head painted on it. It said Tabby Antiques and Junk, Bellburg, Pennsylvania. It had been there a couple of days. It must belong to Michael's grandparents. Then my eyes adjusted, and I saw the tourists. That's what we call the people who come by to see the decorations. I recognized a few. Mr. Sobel, the gym teacher, Ari's family, the man from the bank. Everyone was bundled up with steam-puffed breath. They were clapping their mittens to stay warm. None of them looked precisely joyful. Mr. Jensen peered over my shoulder. Mrs. Jensen peered over my shoulder. Oh, dear, she said, and poured herself more eggnog. Still, at the front door, Professor Jensen tried to explain about the bird's disappearance. The man was not impressed. Give us 1 minute, Mr. Jensen finally said. Then he came back to the people in the living room and said, I guess you caught the gist of that. Mr. Stone argued. Well, I don't care. It's our reputation. We can't let the light display go with half the flock is missing. Oh, fiddle, said Mrs. Ryan. 2 birds. Give the people what they want. Let's put it to a vote, said my dad. Point of order, said Mrs. Pop. Can we please get on with this, said Mrs. Descanato. I vote yes. Yes, shouted a lot of people. Any no's? Professor Jensen looked right at Mr. Stone. No, said Mr. Stone. No, said Jeremiah from the sofa. Professor Jensen ignored them and turned to Mrs. Pop. Anita, there ought to have been a motion in a second, she said, but given the circumstances, yes. That's it then. The lights go on, said Professor Jensen. Luau picked this precise moment to come out from under the dining room table. Meow. He side-rubbed Michael's grandmother's leg. She had just put a shrimp in her mouth. Its tail hung between her lips. Gross if you're a kid. Yummy if you're a cat. Luau, I whispered. Go away, Michael's grandmother bit off the tail. Then she bumped Luau with her foot. Hey, I said, don't kick my cat. I grabbed for him, but he was speedy. In a flash, he leaped to the bookcase next to the switch for the lights and the music. Who do we have here? Asked Professor Jensen. Isn't that your cat, Alex? Asked Professor Pop. I'm allergic, sniffed Mrs. Snyder. Sorry, Dad grabbed Luau off the bookcase and threw him over his shoulder. Proceed, John. Sorry. Everybody watched, even Luau, as Professor Jensen flipped the switch. Outside, the tourists cheered. The music began. On the first day of Christmas, Professor Pop shook his head. Oh, how I've grown to detest that song. Detest means hate. And that's where we're going to stop for today, and we'll pick up our story tomorrow. Thanks for listening.